What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Pioneer video, and I got some gameplay for you today, and I think it's an interesting matchup, the Rakdos mirror, to be specific, and it's like the most played deck versus the most played deck. Mid-range matchups I think are pretty hard to navigate because they do involve probably a little bit more luck, I would say, than most other general matchups, minus like combo matchups and things like that. It's a intensive mirror where you're trading resources with your opponent and you're hoping to like trade favorably, and be left with something at the end of it. And if not, obviously trying to top deck better than your opponent. It's kind of like these slog fests that you just need to kind of work through, and being that these are, this is the most popular deck in the format, playing the most popular deck in the format, this is probably going to be something you run into if you choose to play the best deck in the format. So, of course, before we get too deep into the match, if you are not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more content like this, you want to see modern videos and other longer form content, please consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell so you know when those videos get posted. And if you go down into the description below, I will post the deck list that I am playing in the Mana Trader series currently in the description, and then I have a link to my Discord server as well. Feel free to join over there as well, and be sure to check out the Casual Spikes podcast. It goes up every Saturday. We're not gonna have an episode this week, but we do already have a few episodes, posted on YouTube as well. So if you want to check those out and kind of get some insight on like the modern and Pioneer format, some of our thoughts, and going over the RC Ghent, and then our preparation for RC Denver, is going to be up there. So if you want to check those out, feel free to do so. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into our match. So we talked, obviously, I don't know what our opponent's playing. I'm only into 6, of course, so I have no idea what our opponent's playing. Our previous hand really wasn't all that good. This hand does something. So we have Thoughtseize, Copter, Kroxa, Trespasser. Obviously, we can cast these 3 spells. We have kind of like this neat trick with Kroxa that we can, play Smuggler's Copter on turn 2. Turn 3, if we draw a land, we're going to play Graveyard Trespasser just so we can keep curving out. But if we don't, we can actually Kroxa to come into play with its 2 triggers on the stack. We can make our opponent discard a card, and then we can end up crewing our Smuggler's Copter before we have to actually sacrifice the Kroxa from casting it to get an attack, and then, possibly maybe, loot something away to try to find like a 3rd land and maybe do something for 1 mana, with our multiple draw steps. We are on the draw in this match, so typically in these grindy matchups, I make the mistake in game 2 just because I don't approach it, I guess, in that way. But usually in like these mid-range matchups, you want to be on the draw because you just want to have more resources in your opponent, because you're going to be trading a lot of 1-for-1, and like the rare 2-for-1s you get, you need to like capitalize and take advantage of. So with this hand, we're going to get to be disruptive. They play a Hive of the Eye Tyrant and it immediately screams Rakdos to me. We find like a Blood Tithe Harvester, so like we can kind of get in there. Our opponent's hand, just because it went through pretty fast, we took a Fable of the Mirrorbreaker. They're going to probably play Den Copter, so we know that like this is probably going to be their turn 2, and our turn 2 is just going to probably be Smuggler's Copter, like Land Copter, and we're going to have to figure out how to navigate these 2 Fatal Pushes. Thankfully, we do have a Graveyard Trespasser. It's not really going to be hit favorably with these Fatal Pushes, and even if it does, like they're going to have to lose a permanent, then they're going to have to discard a card to even get around the ward of the Graveyard Trespasser. And of course, we have a Kroxa that's going to be waiting in the wings. We drew a Blood Tithe Harvester. Life is pretty good. Seeing like what our opponent has, we can definitely play around the Fatal Pushes and things like that. So like we know they're going to play Copter. We end up drawing a Sokenzen. We're going to play this because of a few reasons. And while I don't think... I think life total matters a little bit more in like these mid-range matchups than they have before, just because Shieldred does kind of put you on a clock, whether, if an empty board and she's attacking, that's like 2 draws that you have if she's able to get in and connect and stuff. So obviously putting you on a clock of how many cards that you can actually draw to try to out the Shieldred when you get into those top deck situations. So I wanted to conserve the life total, because if it came up where we had to eat a card out of the graveyard, we could shock and play this Graveyard Trespasser. Or we can just play like a Kroxa, play a Blood Tithe Harvester, crew Copter, attack, and then play this Blood Crypt tapped, and then we kind of save us some life, and we still get to play Graveyard Trespasser on like turn 4. Playing a little off curve, but I think ultimately with what we have, with our opponent having 2 Fatal Pushes in hand and 2 unknown cards, I think we're just kind of, hoping that they don't play a creature next turn. Like, I think the worst case, they play like a Fable the Mirror Breaker and crew the Smuggler's Copter. So we go, they end up drawing Thoughtseize. They take Graveyard Trespasser. They had another Thoughtseize was their other card, and they take the Blood Tithe Harvester. So we're thoroughly devastated. But here, we're going to play Kroxa, and we're going to bring up that play I highlighted where we're going to play Kroxa, before we do anything else, and then we're going to force them to discard a card, which means they're going to discard a Fatal Push, crew Copter, and then we're going to get to attack and, get in some damage. We're going to fuel this Kroxa, and look at that, we drew a Blackleaf Cliffs. I wanted to play Cliffs, Thoughtseize, get the other Fatal Push out, so then we knew that our Kroxa was going to be protected. So we have 6 cards in the graveyard, which means we have enough to bring back Kroxa. If we draw a land, we're in good shape. If we draw a Fable the Mirror Breaker, at this point, like, we kind of want to draw a land. Like, our opponent has no Fatal Pushes in hand. All their Fatal Pushes are gone. They just drew their card for turn. We are going to hopefully get to play the Kroxa. They're not going to have very many other removal spells in their deck. They're going to be able to deal with the Kroxa. We're going to be able to close out the game very, very quickly. But then our opponent draws probably the perfect card in Graveyard Trespasser to simultaneously eat our Kroxa and then crew Copter and get in for damage and, potentially get to like their Kroxa and fuel it. Probably no reason to draw a discard there, but they pitch like a Castle Locthwain. The land, I guess, would end up coming to play tap. But, we draw land, this thing flips, and we're just thoroughly getting smacked down. So that's essentially how this game goes. We're, like, not going to come back from this. I believe get to a point where I actually am able to kill this, but then they just have a Stomp to deal the last points of damage. So that's game 1. That's just sometimes how the mid-range mirrors go. If we, obviously, we're drawing, like, a Hive of the Eye Tyrant the next turn. So we weren't going to be able to cast a Kroxa. We were just kind of going to be doing nothing that turn anyway. But we were going to be able to cast a Kroxa next turn, and I believe we end up drawing like a removal spell. A Heartless Act. So, I mean, we were going to end up beating some kind of creature that our opponent was going to play anyway on the next turn. I mean, we were going to be able just to keep getting in for damage. So, I mean, really the fact that, like, this Graveyard Trespasser was obviously, like, the best top deck our opponent could have had, and obviously without knowing how the rest of it's going to play out, I will take a Kroxa getting in and attacking almost over any other creature our opponent can play, like a minus like Shieldred. So that was game 1. Let's go ahead and jump over to game 2, and I'll kind of talk about how I sideboarded in that matchup. So here we are with game 2 of the match. I told you that I kind of made a mistake in this one, where I actually chose to be on the play. Typically in like these mid-range matchups, there's a few things that I like to consider, before starting the game. When we sideboard, I wonder if it'll actually let me see what I boarded in and out. So, in this matchup, you play 4 main deck Thoughtseize. I went down to 2. Then I believe I went down a Bone Crusher Giant. I went down like some of the Smuggler's Copters, and I went up like the Culligan's Commands, and I went up on Unlicensed Hearst, and there was like another card. I think the Go Blank. So my reason for that is, like, Graveyard Hate is, I don't think is going to be specifically all that great. If your opponent's like playing Kroxa and stuff like that, I think Kroxa is still very good in the matchup and can end the game very early, very quickly. If you get to this like empty board state where we got to pretty early in the game last time. But Thoughtseize generally is pretty good to have when you are on like turn 1 or turn 2 to kind of disrupt your opponent from playing something like a Fable the Mirror Breaker or getting to play like Blood Tithe Harvester or things like that. So typically I go down to like 2 Thoughtseizes. I believe in game 3 I might go down to just like 1 Thoughtseize like on the draw. Like, I just don't want to have that card in my deck. Typically in these when we're just trading resources, I'd rather trade resources that affect the board rather than, trade resources that may or may not even come into play, but you're kind of obligated to take sometimes the best card that your opponent has. Smuggler's Copter, I mean, I could see like any of my sideboard decisions like necessarily being a mistake. Smuggler's Copter to me, keeping some in the deck seemed like it was okay. But I feel like there's a lot of times where this is going to sit on the battlefield. It does dodge like the sorcery speed removal and stuff. But I figured that it was going to be a pretty grindy, like attrition-y on the battlefield game, so I didn't want 4 Smuggler's Copter in my deck, where, you know, if I draw one, that's fine, but if I draw, like, the second one, like, it's not going to crew the first one. So, kind of going that route where it's, like, shaving on these, and a Bone Crusher Giant. The Bone Crusher Giant, I think I ended up bringing back in for, like, game 3, but I didn't really have anything else I felt like I wanted to cut, and, you know, if someone in the comments could tell me that I'm wrong, and that Bone Crusher's the best, and there's something else to absolutely take out, but, you know, that is how I sideboarded. Kolaghan's Command allows you to be a little bit grindier as well, you know, getting to return one of the creatures that your opponent destroyed, and then getting to smash either, like, their Unlicensed Hearse or their Smuggler's Copter, or even kill, like, their Blood Tithe Harvester, flip Fable, their Fable token. You know, there's a decent amount of, like, 2 power or 2 toughness creatures that you can get with Kolaghan's Command, and it's just it seems like a clean 2-for-1 in a lot of these matchups as well. So that was kind of the sideboard plan. Typically in mid-range matchups as well, like, you kind of want to be on the draw, and that's, again, just for the raw resources, and any hands that are typically, like, keepable, in the realm of keepable, you have to keep. So, like, this hand in particular is actually, I think, pretty decent. So, I mean, you have Thoughtseize on turn 1, you have Unlicensed Hearse on turn 2, you know, you can eat something with a Hearse, and I believe I make a mistake in this game where I was like, I'm going to activate Hearse, and then I just didn't. Even though it only ate, like, 1 card. You know, could be relevant. But, Inti, Fable the Mirrorbreaker, Fatal Push for something on the board. You know, like, we're able to, like, Thoughtseize, take their push, and then keep Inti in play, and then she's going to kind of get us some card advantage from there. So, I mean, this hand in general is pretty good, but I think, even if it wasn't, you know, we would probably mulligan this. Coming up to get rid of these. So our opponent plays a Blightstep Pathway. So we looked at a hand that was 2 Blightstep Pathways, a Castle Locthwain, a Fatal Push, and a Fable the Mirrorbreaker with a Bankbuster. Now there's 2 ways this can go. You know, we know their opponent probably isn't crewing Reckoner Bankbuster at all. So, like, Fatal Push is not going to get rid of this Bankbuster. They mulligan to 6, and while Fable is going to, like, let them, you know, discard and then draw, it's going to leave them, like, neutral on cards. You know, they're going to discard 2 cards to draw 2 cards. You know, Bankbuster is going to slowly accrue them card advantage. So that is why I took the Reckoner Bankbuster over, like, the Fable the Mirrorbreaker. Just because, like, we're going to have some options later to kind of deal with a Fable anyway. So I was kind of okay with, like, conceding the fact that, like, Inti's probably going to die, but, you know, any other creatures that we have that kind of live, you know, we're going to be able to kill theirs. We have this Unlicensed Hearse that's going to kind of stick around, and then we have, like, our own Fable and stuff like that. So I felt confident just taking away the pure card advantage card over it. And, of course, you know, knowing about the Fatal Push, I'm not going to run the Inti into it. We're just going to force them to be mana inefficient and play this Unlicensed Hearse. Here's where I've messed up. I didn't play the Hearse, but we draw a second Fable. And this is going to set us up pretty good if our opponent decides to Fatal Push, like, token or whatever else. Like, I think I slammed, like, the Fable because it's going to force our opponent to Fatal Push the token, or at least want to Fatal Push the token. And then Inti can come around and, you know, we can attack with Hearse and, you know, get some kind of, like, impulse card advantage going. So being mana efficient, we Fable. We know that they have Fatal Push, so playing Inti and leaving up Push isn't going to do anything. So, but then they end up using the Push to actually get the token. We get to move on. They play the other half of the Blightstep Pathway, and they play their own Fable. So they're sitting with 3 cards, unknown in hand. You know, we already have the option. Like, we're going to be able to double spell anyway. So, like, with this, I believe I drew this Inti, and I think I go and, like, discard both of them. We'll see here in a second. Yeah, I end up discarding Inti. We Fatal Push their token. You know, we drew another land, so, like, we're going to be able to just cast this Fable the Mirrorbreaker and get another token in play, and just kind of be, I think, in a pretty good position, all things considered. So, I hope that doesn't make Moto crash. All right, there we go. So, we do that. We play another Fable, get it going. So, if we can get both of these Fables flipped, we can just make a ton of 2/2s, and then, you know, even with a Bone Crusher Giant in play, we can make a ton of Bone Crusher tokens and try to win the game that way. Opponent discards some lands, they stomp our token, you know, whatever. They play their own Hearse, and then now we have to, like, eat cards, because when both players have a Hearse, like when players back in the day would have Deathrite Shaman, if both players have a Deathrite Shaman, both players have a Hearse, nobody has a Hearse. because I could target 2 cards, like for example, in my graveyard, I target the 2 inties. My opponent can do it. Their unlicensed Hearse is going to get the power and toughness from it. Mine is just going to be, left out to dry. So a little bit of a misstep because, again, we could have like 5 cards underneath of this. And it couldn't be 6 because it only targets a single graveyard. But, we could have a 5 power thing, which ends up attacking, and actually killing a Shieldred in combat if it needs to, if it ever comes to that. So we go to our turn, we draw a Shieldred. Of course, couldn't just have that in play. I'd rather have, obviously we can't catch the Shieldred, but, we pitch the Bone Crusher, taking a chance, and we end up drawing a Shieldred. We have this flip Fable. We have another Fable that's going to flip. They're going to flip there, sure, and they have 2 cards in hand versus our 0, so, in the blind, I'd rather take 2 cards that I don't know about. 2 of any card almost then, kind of faces board state just from the fact that the deck does play a lot of removal. As soon as the Shieldred's gone, our position is just, I think, kind of worse, but they need 2 removal spells at the end of the day anyway. So they play the Bone Crusher and then they play a land. They're sitting with 1 card in hand, and it's looking pretty good for us right now. Then we draw a Heartless Act, and there is kind of a decision here where, we could Heartless Act the Reflection, and then they can't copy the Bone Crusher Giant or whatever. Or we could just kill the Bone Crusher. Sure, we take 2 damage, but the Reflection, fizzles, essentially, and that kind of, wastes our opponent's turn. I think it's still kind of a mistake here. I think I should have just, fired it off on the Reflection, because on their turn, they just get to make, a Bone Crusher Giant for free. So, my mistake here, our opponent goes Bitter Triumph, thought about copying it, but we just crew the unlicensed Hearse just to, they don't have any cards in hand, so, it doesn't cost us, anything. I meant to stop on our opponent's second main phase so that they wouldn't have a Bone Crusher on their turn. And by the time I was able to actually set the stop, it already had, rushed through combat and everything. So a mistake that I know that I made, but not consciously, because, it's one of those things where I wanted to stop it. I didn't want this to happen. So we're thinking. There's no reason for us to attack, especially into double Bone Crusher. We would have attacked with just the Shieldred, but again, we made the mistake. Hearse, I figured, might as well try to eat cards from their graveyard, and then they activate in response. So now, they virtually have, a Hearse. There's 3 on the battlefield, but, really there's only 1 in play. We have a Fatal Push. And, not really going to do too much, but we're going to have Den of the Bugbear, and we're going to be able to attack with all these idiots, and then put our opponent in a position where if they, go to block and, trade with any of this stuff, they block with the Hearse, fine. But if they try to, trade with a Goblin token, they would have gotten blown out by the Fatal Push, because then obviously the card wouldn't stick around. And then they just concede the game. They're at 4 life, even if, they have a removal spell for the Shieldred. That's probably, the most pressing issue. They're going to take 4 from the Den with the attack, plus the Goblin that it makes, and all this other stuff. So that was game 2. Not beautiful by any stretch of the imagination, but, that's kind of how the mid-range matchups go. Is you try to, as soon as you kind of get your finger on the pulse of victory, you try to just keep it on as long as possible until it's all said and done. So that's game 2. Let's go ahead, jump over to game 3, and see how the match concludes. So here we are, game 3. We're on the draw. Obviously our opponent picked the play. That hand was not very good because it was just 2 swamps with a good amount of red cards. I believe this hand I end up keeping. Our opponent mulliganed to 6. End up keeping this hand, and, we bin the other hive. This hand is definitely loose. We're keeping pretty loose here. But the idea being that, we can hive on 1, leave up Fatal Push. Turn 2, we can play a Blood Crypt, tapped, and then, we can Fatal Push, whatever turn 2 play that they might have that isn't Smuggler's Copter. And then from there, we're able to play untapped lands and, leave up Heartless Act, plus Fatal Push. We don't have anything, double spell. Of course, we have, all these draw steps after, so, while we're definitely land heavy, where I'd probably want to be at 3 lands, 3 lands, 3 spells, or 3 lands, 4 spells. Obviously, the fact that we draw this Shieldred gas, we have something to do later, and our opponent just playing Dens, you know, unfortunate for them. But now we have like these untapped lands, like, you know, for 3, 4, and 5, and then we even have a land that we can bin. They play their Fable on 3. We're able to Fatal Push this token and kind of get it out of here. They obviously didn't do anything on the first few turns, you know, so they could be sitting on Shieldred, so we have a Heartless Act for it. And then we draw something to play on turn 3, which is this Fable the Mirror Breaker. So we're able to make our token, and, you know, our opponent ends up discarding 1 card to draw 1 card. And they play their Shieldred, and I believe expertly, nope, didn't stop on the upkeep. Could have done it, but, you know, again, we're just here to make mistakes. I like my hand, so I don't discard anything to it. We attack, and then we're able to leave up Kolaghan's Command. And this is going to do, like, a few things. If our opponent just tries to, like, play a bunch of things, you know, whatever, you know, we're going to kind of get them in a way. Kolaghan's Command here, I'm going to end up killing this Reflection of Kiki-Jiki and then forcing them to discard a card. I would like to be able to, like, play a Shieldred and then, like, oh, if they remove it, you know, then, you know, that's kind of like, oh, hey, guess what? I'm going to pick up my Shieldred. So here I attack, make my treasure token, because we're just going to make an obscene amount of mana. Our opponent actually accepts the trade. I didn't think that we were going to end up trading, but, you know, it is what it is. Mistapping, but then we get a Blood Tithe Harvester. Our opponent has a Triumph, but now we're sitting with a lot of pressure in play. So our opponent, you know, is going to get to draw a card, or, you know, draw a card and then trigger their second chapter of Fable. They draw a Blood Crypt, so then they end up getting to turn it into a new card. They can activate Den and attack and make a 1/1 or whatever, but we're going to be able to kind of block the 1/1. And Reflection plus Blood Tithe Harvester just means that, like, every turn we're just going to make bigger and bigger things. Like, this isn't even going to matter, because we're going to be able to, you know, copy Blood Tithe Harvester, sack the other token. See here, we're going to sack the one that's going to die at the end of turn, and then, you know, just activate Hive, get in for damage, and just try to race our opponent at this point. Eating the Shieldred, being mindful of, like, a potential Kolaghan's Command in the future. You know, like, I mean, at this point, like, that is a way that we could just lose the game, is not being able to hit the right threats, or just assuming that our actions don't matter when they absolutely could have mattered. And, of course, that we end up winning that game. I'm assuming the draw step just was nothing. They're going to flip Fable, and then we're going to be able to Harvester again to make another blood token and give this -6/-6 and attack for another 6, eat their graveyard, and they're going to have to beat a Menace land, and then they're going to have to beat a Blood Tithe Harvester, and the Reflection can get in as well, you know, if need be, or, you know, just make another copy of Blood Tithe Harvester and attack, you know, whatever the case is. But, yeah, that is the kind of like how maybe not like a typical Rakdos midrange, like, battle actually goes. But in, like, the mirror and stuff, you can see, like, all 3 games were very, like, attrition-y. You were definitely, like, hoping that you top deck better than your opponent, and, you know, and hopefully, like, favorably trade as well, you know, where, like, the value of your cards go up. Like, even if, like, you know, 1-for-1's not being treated equal, where, like, your removal spell on a Shieldred obviously is, like, a huge benefit to you, more so than it is your opponent, where, like, you know, those games where maybe we traded, like, Fatal Pushes for, like, Fable tokens and stuff like that, because we, you know, if you prioritize, like, the mana production or whatever, like, it's pretty good for you to kill it, and, you know, if you just don't generally care, then, like, the Fatal Push feels kind of wasted, you know, in those scenarios. But, you know, it is what it is. But, yeah, that is that is the mid-range, red-black mid-range kind of match, I guess. This is, like, how I would approach the mirror, how I would attack it. Some things, I guess, to note and wrap up as we get to the end, at the end of the video here. Mid-range matchups, I think, technically, and I think the discipline and right thing to do is just to take the draw when you know that you're playing a mid-range matchup. Now, that doesn't mean game 1, just assume that you're playing against Rakdos mid-range and you're just going to take the draw if you have the option to, because that is bold. But definitely in games 2 and game 3, when you're playing the sideboarded games, I like going down discard spells, and I like going up, you know, like the Go Blanks and some of the other Graveyard Hate, and then the other, like, grindy elements that the deck has, simply for the fact that you are going to get into these games. Like, I mean, if we drew, like, whatever, if our opponent, like, answered, like, Reflection of Kiki-Jiki or whatever, and we just have this Blood Tithe Harvester, like, we draw, like, our second Kolaghan's Command, or, like, we have a Kolaghan's Command in backup, like, we just pick up a Shieldred and, you know, have the potential to like play it as well. You know, pick up a Shieldred and then force you to discard a card, you know, where we're getting a banger back and you're possibly losing your removal spell or maybe your own Shieldred and what have you. And yeah, like these can get very, you know, it's like a slogfest, and you just need to be mentally prepared when going into those matchups and knowing that like it's going to be tough, and you need to make favorable trades and make yourself as grindy as possible and try to make your opponent's decisions pretty meaningless and try to make the most out of the decisions that you get to make in this matchup. So that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like on the video. Comment down below if there's another deck that you would like to see played. I'm going to be trying to bring some other matches and stuff from the Mana Traders event, hopefully qualifying and maybe streaming the event if we actually qualify for the Swiss round. So I think that'd be really cool. So if you want to check all that out, please be sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you know when videos and other things get posted. You find the deck list in the description down below. You can find the Discord server in the description below. And, of course, check out the Casual Spikes podcast, where we have a few episodes in playlist here on the channel. So that's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.